So if you're not familiar with FRRR, the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal, we are the only national foundation that's specifically focused on ensuring social and economic strength in remote, rural and regional areas of Australia. We work with government, philanthropy and private donors and are looking to support community purposes and make investments for thriving communities into the future. We've partnered with Suncorp since 2021 on this grant program. And it's a grant program that looks to be responsive to disasters. We know that the experience of disasters is increasing in frequency and intensity, and I really like to acknowledge that I know there's many communities in Australia that once again are experiencing significant flooding events and that are going to require them to have support in the future. I think what we know in regards to building resilience is that it's a dynamic process and not a static state. And we know that some people are a bit sick of the word resilience. So I'd just like to acknowledge that we want to hear from you. We want to understand what you need. We're very understanding when we consider the projects you're trying to do or the challenges you might be presented with in supporting your communities through recovery and preparedness when we look at community resilience. And it's really what it means to you to strengthen your community. So the purpose of this grant program, more broadly, is really about making sure that there are funds in communities, particularly after the agencies have left. So not in that immediate relief process. And that's why these grants aren't for communities currently experiencing disasters or in 2026. They are for communities that have had an experience in that 2019 to 2025 period. Also, really recognising that that's, up to 6 years ago, but those communities are still recovering or still learning or have had multiple experiences of disaster and coming to terms with how they actually cope with future vulnerability, how they strengthen communities, and they build those not only physical infrastructure, but also community well-being that supports them into the future to cope with whatever comes. This actual grant round has 2 grant streams that's looking at that response. So there's a total of $600,000 available in funding, and all grants are up to $25,000. In Stream 1, we're calling this Disaster Resilient Communities, and it's for all remote, rural and regional Australian communities impacted by disasters from January 2019, apologies for the typo there, to December 2025. So we know that there has been over 300 disasters declared in this time, some small and large, but we are open to hearing from any community that's had that impact and understand what project they have that will actually shift their recovery to make things better or make them more prepared for the future. In Stream 2, these are disaster recovery grants, and they're specifically for Queensland communities impacted in 2025 by Tropical Cyclone Alfred or the Western Queensland trough flooding. So this is dedicated funding that was announced at the time of that disaster, and we're making it available now for that medium to long-term recovery projects. The grant program is open now, and it closes at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, the 16th of April. The applications must be for projects that can be completed between July 2026 and July 2027. And we will be announcing this funding in late June 2026. Really quickly, who's eligible to apply? Not-for-profit organisations with or without DGR1 endorsement are eligible. If you do not have DGR1 status, which is deductible gift recipient status, you require an incorporation certificate and or an ABN to demonstrate your legal organisational status. Just call FRRR if you're not quite sure about that. You must be in a disaster declared LGA. The projects must be for charitable purposes and offer clear public benefit. You can only submit one application per grant round and only apply to one stream. And obviously, these grants are only for remote, rural or regional Australia. We encourage you to read the guidelines thoroughly for any more detail. When we're talking about localities, just to support you, we do refer to the Disaster Assist government website, which is where you can actually find any disaster that has been declared from 2019 to 2025. And also for Stream 2, those Queensland communities with those specific disasters, we have a list of eligible Queensland local government areas that you can get a link to on our website, and we will also provide when we send these through to you. Now, if your community has been impacted by a disaster in this period and for some reason it's not listed on the site, give us a call at FRRR and we'll discuss your project and eligibility with you. And you know, if you've got a case for support, we're very open to listening to you and understanding your project and how we might be able to support you. So really important with the criteria across both streams is that this funding is supporting projects for initiatives that support medium to long-term recovery. So not immediate relief with regards and not supporting individual relief as well with disasters that have just occurred. We need you to seek to achieve at least one of the following: assisting recovery from the impact of disaster, strengthening prevention and preparedness for the future, or evidencing outcomes of one or more of 7 critical dimensions for building community resilience. Now, there's a link there, and this is based on some research we've done that says that any of these elements of inclusion in a project, building networks, strengthening communication, making information available, helping communities to organise better and developing self-organising systems that can be responding during disasters, but also outside of disasters, and also supporting local decision-making to be strong, clear, and be the local voice for advocacy for what's needed, and specific resources that can actually support communities as well. So it might sound quite complex, but I think many of you will find with your projects that they actually have these dimensions within them. So for the more basic, I think, understanding of, you know, what we'll actually fund, we'll fund you to deliver or provide activities, events, programs and services. You can purchase or hire equipment and materials, you know, that will support your project or program. You can do small community infrastructure projects that support community facilities and buildings that make them either more prepared for future risk or ensure that they are there to support people during disasters. You can build the capacity of your organisation through training, you know, understanding more about network systems, collaboration, even strengthening particular technical systems that you might use during a disaster, are also all types of capacity building that we'll consider. You can do sessions and programs that support mental health and wellbeing. We know this is a particular area of vulnerability after a disaster and in the long term, and so we're really conscious that funds can sometimes be difficult for these programs and how vitally important they are. Also, community resource development. So really recognising that volunteers are a critical, often first responders, but also just support mechanisms in that community. So programs that can actually develop your volunteers, we're very interested in looking at those and supporting you with those. Really importantly, what cannot be funded. This is for specific projects, that might take a year, 12 months in duration to operate. Ongoing core organisational operation costs, such as the rent or utilities or every day of regular wages that's your ongoing business, can't be funded through this, but we will fund the wages of staff that are dedicated to the delivery of this project. Projects that are subject to an insurance claim or should be covered by current insurance policy, we won't fund these. Please give us a call if you want to talk to us about your current situation or how this might how there might be some challenges in your project that are related to this this ineligibility. If you're running a project or a program such as an event, we can't fund any prizes, gifts, trophies, or awards that might be a part of that event. So please look for sponsorship in other ways. These are projects to support the broad community benefit, and they should be charitable. So private business, sole trader, or private interests won't be supported. These are not grants to support political lobbying and or evangelist groups, but we will support advocacy. Projects solely focused on animal welfare. We're conscious that in rural, regional, and remote, both the wildlife and also domestic animals are often impacted severely during disaster. These are for human benefit. So any project with an element of animal protection or support needs to demonstrate how that also supports the broader community in regards to their involvement and engagement and the outcomes of that project. Sport is not a charitable activity under Australian law. So any application from a sporting organisation needs to clearly demonstrate charitable outcomes and benefit to the wider community that are above and beyond the sporting activities of the club and benefiting more than just the members of the club through that. Look, I think it's always really valuable to understand what's been done before and look at projects. So we've got some project examples here. This was in the Hawkesbury, which has had significant flooding over the last 6 years on several occasions. This was through the local city council. We do fund councils through this grant program. It needs to be above and beyond their normal remit of services. And so we need that to be demonstrated in an application. The issue here was accessible digital resources for residents in the Hawkesbury region, and they needed equipment and internet access in community hubs. This has been a really great program that's actually also supported just that connection of people, particularly vulnerable residents within the region, with social support. So often we see much bigger outcomes than what were originally planned. The King Community Group in New South Wales have also experienced both fires and floods. They had a community building that was very under-resourced, and they needed that essential office equipment to operate effectively. So this is a really good example of building capacity in a community organisation. And so now they feel far more prepared for future natural disasters because they have those essential resources. A really great outcome was the creation of a community member registry, which enables instant communication and also identifies really vulnerable people to be looked out for during emergency times. These are two examples, and I think, often we do get asked about what we will fund. And as you can see with Rochester Senior Citizens, funding here supported greater incorporation of mitigation and hazard assessment principles in the planning and design phase of rebuilding their op shop that have been damaged in floods. So often, there might be the basics of, oh, we need to get this done and we'll get a local builder in to get there. The ability to get greater expertise to really make sure that the building is prepared to withstand future flooding and isn't just repaired is really important. So if you are looking to get that expertise to really support you in your preparedness, we're very open to looking at projects that have those needs. And with Ralph Downey Memorial Grounds Association, this was a damaged arena. Now, I think, some people might go, is that sport? I think this is a really good example of us understanding that these memorial grounds provide significant other social benefit other than just for, the horse activity and equestrian activity that goes on there. The local camp trusts attract a lot of visitors to the region. There's markets, there's people camping there. These are really central and also really important for the coordination of natural disasters and emergencies. So we recognise that these sites are really valuable to be repaired and are very open to funding projects like this. If you want more examples, I'd suggest you go and you just have a search for Rebuilding Futures, where you can see it's been highlighted there in yellow. And these are just a few examples of, really those social wellbeing grants with regards to, creating a hub where people can come together and go through programs or experience sharing stories to address the trauma around it, and also really strengthening that organisational capacity. We have a whole of community response to child and youth wellbeing. So this was really important to actually support the training of volunteers to actually respond to some of the real challenges in child youth wellbeing that was exacerbated by several disasters in that area. And then that really practical how to make your building better, looking at those future disasters or power outages and looking at things like solar battery packs that and that reduce the reliance on the power system and support them to have a community facility that can actually operate when there is a disaster. So I think it's we're really, when you are writing your project, and Jane's going to go into all the, that getting down to the nitty gritty, but it's really important for us because this is a program that's looking to support communities related to their disaster impacts and how they recover and prepare for it in the future is relating your project to the experience of the disaster, and therefore why the project's been identified as needed. And really important to understand who is actually going to be supported through the project and what the project is. Also really important, what will happen if you do not do this project. So we strongly encourage you to demonstrate your engagement with other community groups, letters of support, project interest and engagement. And we also highly recommend that if you've got any questions after this or when you're doing your grant application, that you give the FRRR staff on the phone a call or email us, and we'll respond to your queries so that you can really feel confident and not waste any time and overcome any challenges in actually writing your grant. So just a real program priority snapshot. Where relevant, or projects should demonstrate experience of a disaster impact that informs their project design and delivery. Show us that it is suiting the local community needs, priorities and interests, and it is locally determined. We recognise, more and more First Nations knowledge and cultural practices that contribute to both care for country and also that community wellbeing. So we're very interested in the partnerships that are occurring, or we'd like to hear from First Nations community organisations as well with regards to their response to disasters. Also, this grant program is, for small community organisations that have a limited ability to attract funds from other donors or government. They're $25,000 grants. They're to meet those, important needs for you. They're not the big $200,000, $300,000 grants, but they could be the grant that helps you put a feasibility study together or develop plans for future funding requirements. So we've made it really broad to support you. Do read the guidelines. We're really clear. We've got 2 streams of grant funds there. And we've made this application period longer than normally. So it's open for 6 weeks. So we're closing on 16th of April on Thursday at 5 p.m. And right now I'm going to stop and have a look at the chat and see what we've got in there, and see if we've got any other questions to answer for you.
So thanks, Danielle. I'm just now going to run through some general grant information, grant writing information, which you can use to apply for any of FRRR grant programs. They all generally follow a similar format, so this information can be used across most of the programs, if not all. So basically, in my head, there's sort of 2 stages to grant writing. The one is the preparation and the planning, which is probably the one that you have to dedicate the most time to. And in this stage, it's important to allow plenty of time and be aware of the program's closing date of 16th of April so that you don't leave the application until the last minute. We do often receive calls for those who are, doing it on the last day, and there is a sense of panic, which we don't like people to have to go through if that can be helped. So, yeah, give yourself a lot of time. The preparation and planning stage basically is all about the information gathering, and all the forms follow a similar format. We just need to know the what, the why, the where, the when, the who, and the how. So I think that's reasonably straightforward when you're thinking about your project and how it's going to solve an issue. So if we start with the what, this is all about what you want to do with your project. And here it's about, are you solving an issue or building on a great opportunity for your community? It's important to provide us with a bit of context as to where your idea came from. Was it something happening in your community that informed your project idea and led onto what you're hoping to carry out for your community? And just make sure that the idea considers the wider community, as we like to see that there's more than just yourself wanting the project to go ahead, and it will benefit a broad spread of the community. So yeah, just make sure you demonstrate that when you're answering the what. Next, we consider the why, and here we're interested in, why is the project important? Why is the project needed? You can also position it as, what will happen if you do not do this project? So that's just a way of indicating to us that it's really needed and valued, and if it doesn't go ahead, this is the outcome. Just a real pitch on convincing us that it is an important project. And when you're answering the why, you might find yourself referring to some data that substantiates what you are describing. If this is the case, just do upload that data into your application. There are spots in the form to upload the data. Some people refer to, the council strategy document indicated that, the community was going to focus on this. Well, if that's what you're saying, just make sure you upload the council strategy document. Just sort of, yeah, if you're referring to references, upload them so we can see it. And to make it easier for us, it would be great if you could reference the page number, if that's at all possible. So next, we just like to understand who is involved in your project. And with this, we just want to know who's involved in the running of the project, who's participating in the project, as in attending events. You might just say, you might just give examples of what people you're focusing your event towards. And so, yeah, we just like to know that sort of stuff. And then who is also benefiting from this project. And a strong grant application includes letters of support from those that are involved in the project. It's really the only way the assessors know that you have engaged with these people, and that you're not just saying this will benefit so and so. You've actually reached out to the so and so, and they've provided you with a letter of support to show that they are interested in your project. Now, Danielle mentioned the organisation needs to have an incorporation and an ABN. FRRR does allow for those that don't have it to be auspiced by someone that does have it. And there is a letter of support, like a template letter, that we ask you to complete, just to show us that your auspicing agent is aware that you've listed them as being the ones legally responsible for the grant. So, yeah, that's just a good way for those smaller groups that may not have an ABN or an incorporation number to be eligible to apply for our funding. Yeah, so next is the how, when, and where. And basically, that's just how is both the key project stages and how you know the project will be successful. The key, when you're writing about the key project stages, this is the way you can demonstrate to the assessors that you've stepped out the work plan and you've identified the required resources and responsibilities in all the different parts of the project plan. It shows the assessors that you've taken the time to think through your plan and and how it's actually going to make it happen. Again, a lot of this sounds straightforward, but a lot of people apply without providing this information. So when you do, it just strengthens your application. So remember to do that. And the how you know the project has been successful, this allows you to identify the expected outcomes and to note how life in the community will be improved because your project went ahead. Thinking about this question encourages you to think early about how you will measure success and how you're going to gather data, whether that be hard data as for example, attendance numbers, or more qualitative data such as community feedback. If you can tell us in your application that that's what that you've thought about these aspects, again, it contributes to a stronger application. The when, that's just your project start and end date, and you just have to indicate that everything that you have planned for can be conducted within the 12 months that we allow for the grant process project to happen. So July 2026 to July 2027. And the where is just the location of the project, both the regional location, but also if it's happening in a certain building or a certain outside area, and that if necessary, you've got the required permits and permission to host those activities within those areas. Another how is how much will the project cost? So this is collected in the budget within the application form, and it collects both the sources of the income and the expected costs. With the costs, be sure that you factor in the real expenses such as things like freight and GST. And the GST is for those that aren't registered for GST, and therefore they'll have to cover the cost of the GST on the items. So do use GST inclusive prices if you are that type of organisation. For costs that are greater than $1,000, we do require either quotes or costings on how you got to this budgetary figure. Quotes can be as simple as a snip from a website just to show that, you saw a table and it costs, well, a table would be very expensive at $1,000, but maybe it's 10 tables and they each cost $100. So yeah, just a snip of a website is as basic as it can be. And if it's for costings of labour, just show us the hourly rate that the contractor is charging and then how many hours it will take to achieve the job. The income, it needs to be broken down into grant funding, co-contributions from your organisation or other co-funders if the grant income won't cover the full cost. And you can also, here we also ask for in-kind support. So if you're involving volunteers in running or doing the grant project, we suggest that you estimate their cost at $45 an hour and that you just list it in the in-kind support section of the budget. So that's all sort of the prep and the planning, the basics of. The next bit is sort of writing your FRRR application. The first step is we've moved to a new portal recently. So you will have to create an account within the Blackboard granting platform. So you go to the login on our FRRR website, which is on the top right, and then you select the Blackboard grants portal and create an account. So it should be relatively straightforward, but if you do run into difficulties, again, this is where you can use the 1-800 number to call the staff and yeah, we'll talk you through getting an account so that you can then start application forms. So once you've got the account, you then can navigate yourself to an online application form. This is on the program's landing page. So in this case, the Rebuilding Futures landing page. Tab 3, I think is apply now. So you click there. You'll have the option to start a form on, depending which stream you're applying to, one or the other. And then all the questions will appear on there and you just work your way through all the different questions. On this tab 3 page, there's also a possibility to download a sample PDF copy of the application form. If you like to see it and write it on hard copy before you go onto the online, yeah, just click on that and you can print that out for yourself. The other thing to keep in mind with the new portal is we now have an auto save feature. So the system will save your application as you move through it. Prior, you had to press the save button constantly and run the risk of the internet dropping out. Here we have an auto save feature, so it's much more user friendly. The new portal also has the capability of adding multiple people to your application form. And so that allows, more than just one person being in the application form and providing the information. So if that's how you like to work, then that does have the facility to do that. And then the last thing to note is that FRRR also has a grant seeker resource page that is on, you can get to through our website, through the funding tab. You'll see a drop down which will come up with the grant seeker resource page. There's lots of other information. One of them is the frequently asked questions, which can be quite useful. The other thing is there's a link to a community data tool, and this is where you can click and it'll give you information about your location, such as the remote index. And I'll include a link to that tool within the email that we send out to you, just so you have it as a quick reference. So finally, here's just some general tips on writing. Just use clear, simple language and spell out your acronyms. Assume we know, limited amount on some things, so important to spell out acronyms if you're using them. Yeah, most of it all is pretty straightforward here. The tips: use facts, not opinions, be specific. Yeah, and it's probably a good idea to read it out aloud once you've done it so that it makes sense, or have someone else who's totally new to what you're planning, just so they can ask you questions where they think might need some clarification. And then the next page is basically a summary of what makes a strong application and a not as strong. I won't go through it because we have just brought it up, but when you receive this slide deck, you'll have that there to reference. And then lastly, it's just a bit of information about the process. Once you hit submit within your application form, it's over to FRRR to assess each of the applications. We then take our list of recommendations to a program advisory committee, who then also run through all of the projects. Then a list comes out of that advisory committee, which then gets taken to FRRR's CEO, and they have the delegated authority from the FRRR board to sign off on those recommendations. Whether you're successful or unsuccessful, everyone will receive an email to let them know of their outcome. The successful applicants will have a letter that's also, I'm going to cough, a letter which tells them how to access the funds and how to promote their project. And the unsuccessful are, I'm not sure if you can hear my telephone calling, but I'll just carry on. The unsuccessful will be offered a chance for feedback. And we do recommend that people take up this opportunity for feedback, because we do try and give you information that will help you in an application in the future. And FRRR are constantly opening grant programs throughout the year. And so, yeah, if no luck with this program, there's many grant programs opened throughout the year. And we suggest those that are interested in future grant programs to sign up to the FRRR e-newsletter, which you can do via the website. Just use the search function to find the sign up spot, search for newsletter, and you'll get there. And the monthly newsletter is where we let the readers know which grant programs are open or opening soon. So it's a handy source of information. I think I've come to the end of my section, Danielle. So again, just remember the 1-800 number, which is on our website and also in this document or this presentation, and our either info inbox or our granting inbox if you have any queries that you want following up with after this presentation. So thank you, and let us know if there's any further questions or any questions.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Jane. So yes, any further questions, people can ask directly if they want to put their hand up. We don't have anything in the chat, which I'm glad we've covered everything. I do encourage you just to read the guidelines for anything further. And if anything comes to you when you're developing your application that you've got some questions on, reach out to us. And we're very happy to talk you through it. and understand more about your project so that we can support you to put in the strongest application that aligns to the criteria of this grant. As Jane said, we will be sending out the slide deck, recording, and a few notes within that email with regards to handy links to support you in your grant applications. And I wish you all the best. And if you are in a currently impacted area, yeah, I send all my care for your community and for your own personal safety. Thank you very much.